Hey, what's up, guys? Get back on here to do my weekly podcast. Hope you guys are all doing good. And I just want to reiterate, if you guys are Italian football fans or football fans in general, make sure you guys subscribe to my channel. And with that said, I'm going to be talking about Serie A today and what I've been seeing in Serie A lately. And I'm going to be having this little mini series over the next couple weeks talking about this topic. And has Italian football lost its identity? Right now, when I watch Serie A games, and I know a lot of you, or maybe some of you, don't don't know, but I'm sure a lot of you do know because I hear a lot of times people complaining. But typically, when I watch a Serie A game, I can't help but notice, especially for certain teams, that most of the starting lineup is foreign players. A perfect example of this is Udinese or AC Milan or Hellas Verona or Como. It's pretty crazy if you ask me. It's pretty crazy. I'm not saying I'm against foreign players in the league. I think there's pros and cons about it, but sometimes I see games where you have 22 players on the field and like one or two are Italian. And then we wonder why, we don't have, certain types of players, et cetera, et cetera. I've been a fan of Italian football, as I've told you guys, since 1990. I've grown up, watching this football, and I'll always believe, in Italian football and support it and do what I could to help it out. That's why, I started this channel. So I feel that, I should shed some light on this situation that I see in the pros and cons of it and how, I think we could fix it. Serie A, it's always, for me, it's always been about intelligence, tactics, technical mastery. And, I see that the league is going more with foreign players a lot of times. I mean, don't get me wrong. There's times, I'll watch Fiorentina play and they got 5, 6 players that are Italian starting, or I'll watch, some other teams play and they got 3, 4 Italians, which is great. But in addition to this, foreign players playing in the league, I think the Serie A is like 35%. I think the Premier League's like 30%. I think in Spain, um, there's a higher number of Spanish players playing in La Liga. But in Italy, I think it's like 35% play, that are Italian that play in Serie A. And same thing in Premier League. But in addition to, seeing these foreign players, what I also see that some of these players that they bring in, they're not like the typical type of player you would see in Serie A. It's more of a physical, athletic player. Like, for example, I'll use AC Milan as an example. They have some players over there like this guy Ruben Loftus-Cheek. You know, honestly, to tell you the truth, back a long time ago, in the '90s, I would have never see a player like Ruben Loftus-Cheek in Serie A. I mean, the biggest player I've ever seen in Serie A, if they were not like a center back or something like that, was probably Christian Vieri, and he was a striker. But these are, like I'm seeing, in addition to, these players being foreign, that these teams are getting, like players, from the Premier League, Ruben Loftus-Cheek, um, and some other, you guys know Napoli. They got McTominay, which he's a good player. I'll give him props, but I feel like when I watch a Serie A game now, a lot of times, in addition to being a lot of foreigners, that they have this players that are maybe more athletic or physical, and it's just not what I've grown up. It's not what I've grown up seeing in Italy, or what I feel Italian football is about. And don't get me wrong, there's a physical aspect of the game, and it does obviously help to be more athletic, more a physical player. But to be honest with you, Filippo Inzaghi and Andrea Pirlo and players like this, and Christian Panucci, and these type of players, they're probably like 140 pounds soaking wet. Cafu, the list goes on and on. Gianluca Zambrotta, um, maybe 10, 15, 20 years, the biggest brute we had in the league was Gennaro Gattuso. He was more of a midfield warrior. But we have these coaches are more getting, they're getting more of like, and these more physical players, and it's just like I scratch my head here, and I'm like, are we losing our identity here? And it just feels different. I watch these games. I watch Hellas Verona, and they got these players, and never even heard of these players, and they're just more of a Lazio. Nah, maybe some players on Lazio, Lecce. You guys know what I'm talking about. Go watch a game, and you'll see it's more of a precedence, on a bigger, more athletic, physical player. And I think there's a place for that in the game, but I don't, put the value on a player like that as I do. I put a value on a player, like, in my opinion, a player like that is never gonna is likely not gonna earn you a World Cup championship. It's not. I mean, if you look at history, you know, the these teams that put more precedence on more athletic, physical, they're not typically winning the World Cup. I mean, these teams that win the World Cup and they win these high level championships, they have a DNA and a style of play. And for me, the style of play that Italian football always prided itself on, what I fell in love with, what why I was so proud to be Italian, was because, like Del Piero said, we had a little bit of different way of looking at the game. We had that nobody else understood. I remember Del Piero was doing an interview on Sky Sports Italia, and he said that the Spanish, they robbed, like, our mastery of the game, or something to that extent. They took, like, what we were doing, like, we just had a different level of looking at the game, and um, different level of looking at the game. And one second, we just had a different level of looking at the game than anybody else, unfortunately. And we're kind of like going away from, we're kind of like, I don't think we're going away from it, but it's like we're getting these foreign players and more physical players, and it's like, are we losing our identity here? It seems like they're getting, more physical, imposing players, foreign players, older players that are more experienced, that, could be trusted, players from other parts of Europe, smaller markets, different places around the world, often, maybe older, more cheaper, they're maybe have a little more experience, and they could be thrown into the game, and they're more ready, or maybe and there's lower lower work to do on that player. And again, this is not anti-foreign players or anti, physical, athletic, whatever you want to call it, players. Um, I'm just looking for a balance and a pathway for Italian players to be developed and to help my national team to be the best it could be, because Italian players, when developed, are some of the best players in the world. And with this foreign imports and these, cheaper, maybe older, physical players coming in, it's creating issues for Italian development. And I think that these teams are doing this because I hate to bring it down to the youth level, but in the youth level, I'll use the youth level in the USA for an example. And I think this is what's going on in Italy too, as embarrassing as I think it is. But in youth level in the United States, you have these people that are running these clubs, these youth clubs, that they probably have no business running a club. They probably don't have, coaching licenses. They've not gone to school. They put an emphasis on winning over development of kids, for the betterment of their career. You'll get these teams that a U11 team, U12, 13, 14, whatever, or smaller. They find the player that he could run faster. He is a more aggressive, whatever, and they put him on the team because the other players, they they're maybe not as fast, or they're not, as, aggressive and whatever. And this kid could bully the kids and maybe have a better opportunity to score goals. And then these coaches, they win a game, and then they get a, coach of the year award. And then maybe they could coach it, at a different level, and they're basically career coaches that are trying to gain from exploiting kids, if you ask me. That's basically what's going on. I said it. That's what it is. That kids are being used to better their career versus, you know, developing the kids. And, if you had a kid that's so very good on the ball and this and that, but he's not as fast, or he understood how to play the ball, or, where to, you know, um, how to distribute the ball, but he's not as fast, or maybe sometimes doesn't get rid of the ball fast enough. He's probably not going to be playing on on a higher team, because they're looking for just kick the ball and run a lot of times. And I think some of that is going to the professional level. And I'll go back to Italy, and I'm not saying that that's entirely what's happened at the professional level, but I think that there's a tremendous amount of pressure to win in Italy, especially because the the money isn't as much as maybe in the Premier League. And these clubs, they're not willing to wait to reap the fruits of the labor of a player, a more tactical player that understands positional awareness, that understands has very good ball handling skills. They're not willing to wait for that, so they go and they find some player, maybe he's older. I'll use Luka Modric as an example. He's more of a safer bet versus letting another player who can make a mistake and cost the game, because there's very low, there's fine margins there. So they get these players that are older, maybe cheaper, that maybe have a little bit more experience, or a bigger, faster physical player, because the coach, he wants to play, this high pressing game, and he wants his players to run around like a chicken with a head cut off, and it's less risky for them. So basically, I think this comes down to that the Serie A clubs, they want to obviously have massive pressure on them to win in Europe, to make money in European competitions like Conference League, Europa League, Champions League. Um, to them, the success now is more important than long-term development. It's kind of like you're trying to develop your life, and if you're doing these things, and you get to this point eventually, like you bear the fruits of your labor, but they don't want to wait for these players to be developed, or they don't want to give them the opportunity to develop, and so they just throw these guys in there because they want the results right now. And you know I understand that. I want the Italian teams to do good in Europe, but I think it's coming at the detriment of the Italian players. um these clubs are saying that they can't wait, they need results now. And they're saying that maybe a 19, 21-year-old um, player is not ready to be at that elite level in Serie A or wherever, and they get some other players, maybe 26 years old from Eastern Europe or whatever, Bosnia or something like that, or Slovakia. You got this guy for Napoli, La Bocca. He's maybe I'm not sure when they got them, but they put these guys in there because they feel more safe, maybe not as expensive. And but again, I'm not anti, foreign players, or anti, a different type of players. I think there's, in modern day football, there's that these things cannot be avoided, and I think some of it is there's pros and cons to it. Um, like any business in the world, and I'm not trying to make soccer about being a business, but any business in the world, if you don't change with the times, you die. Look at, Blockbuster Video. They could have bought Netflix twice. They didn't want to. They said, "Oh no, we know how to do things. Don't we know how to do things? We don't need, Netflix." And they died. And obviously, we don't want Italian football to die. We want to evaluate the situation and keep our identity, but maybe, you know, um, adapt, a little bit, to tweak that. So, like I said, these teams, they want to win now, and they think that getting a higher player, maybe that was in the Premier League, he's an older player and he hasn't been playing for that team, and he's 25, 26, and he hasn't been playing for whatever, Chelsea or somebody like Ruben Loftus-Cheek, or Pulisic or something like that. And he's 25, 26, and he hasn't been playing on those teams over there. So they say, hey, come over here. They know he's been playing, they have more experience than a 19, 20-year-old, and they bring him in there, and they feel that's a more safer bet for them to get results, because results mean money. And because of that, Italians get fewer minutes, to develop later, lose confidence or visibility, and the national team has a smaller elite pool, fewer players tested at high level. It's good business in the short term, but is it good football in the long term? I've always said that to win soccer or football, culture, whatever you want to call it, at the highest level, brain is always more than brawn. While people are playing checkers, the real teams that win are playing chess. Like I said, Italian football historically has valued tactical intelligence, game management, reading space, reading the game situation, positional awareness. The brain beats the body. Um, Italy won by being smart, not stronger. Being physical in the modern day football, it does matter, but it should support being what we expect from Italian football, not replace it. And again, I'm not anti, foreign players in Italy, or anti, these type of players. You know, some pros of it are that bringing in the some international players, maybe they help in the short term to get results, but they have the negative effects, like I told you, and they bring viewers into the league, which I'm sure Serie A, in its teams, their CEOs and presidents are happy about, and I'm happy about it too, because I've always said that the Serie A, even though it's a global brand and people all over the world watch it, we need to do more to grow the brand internationally, especially with the younger community. So bringing in these players like from South America, or from United States, or from Africa, or from other European countries, it's not all gloom and doom. You're getting more people. Like La Bocca, he plays for Napoli. I'm sure that he has a lot of fans in his home country, and they support Napoli, and that's probably helping bring more money into the club. I know Pulisic, he's been doing great, and I'm sure a lot of American players that follow him, American people, they watch AC Milan, and so it's not all bad. It's good. But the Italian Football Federation and these clubs, and we'll get into this more in future editions of this mini series, but Italian football and Serie A clubs, we need to find a way to allow our players to play and to develop at the highest level. And some may say, that England, they have 30% of players in their domestic league, and Italy has, a little more. And so why does England seem to be fine while Italy feels like it's in a crisis with regards to, players in the national team? We'll get into that in later episodes. This will be broken down in different episodes. Like I said, the global players, they if they're good enough, if then I don't see that it's entirely a problem. They bring attention, they bring revenue, they expand Serie A's brand. And honestly, to be true and honest with you, people that like to crap on Italy and this and that about their football, I hear it all the time in North America, and but to be honest with you, we're not at the standard that we expect. But if you were to go to 99% of countries in the world, I'm sure that 99% of them would take Italy's situation, having the second strongest soccer league in the world, um, having the talent that the Italian national team has. As much as people want to say that we don't have talent, the Italian national team has a squad value of almost 900 million. And the team with the highest squad value is England, over a billion. And everybody knows that player values in England are inflated. So Italian football is not dying. We just are at a crossroads here, and we need to find a way to keep our identity and to adapt better to modern football. So in closing, this episode is not about complaining. It's about understanding what's going on in Italian football. And after my research and following Italian football for many, many, many years, this is what I've come to conclusion is happening. And instead of people complaining and bitching that oh, Italian football is not what it was, or this and that, or oh, our stadiums suck, or this and that, or Italian football is dead, or Italian football is a you know is soccer in Italy is dead, this and that, is not. Um, you know, there's people that are, doing great things and trying to find solutions. New stadiums are being built. Um, our teams in European competition are doing good. Um, we still have an opportunity to qualify for the World Cup. And I know that the Italian Football Federation, they hired Cesare Prandelli, who was the Italian national team coach in 2014, and he's going to do some things. We'll see what he's going to do, but he's going to, work on things to try to improve the youth development. Um, and it's not all gloom and doom. So, with that said, hope you guys liked the episode. In the next episode, we're going to continue this mini series, and we're going to talk about Italy's greatest strength, our coaches, our tactical minds, and why that might be the key to fixing all of this. Make sure you guys subscribe, follow, and join the conversation, because Italian football is worth protecting. We've won 4 World Cups, 2 European Championships, and the history speaks for itself. And we're gonna get through this. And let me know what you guys think. If you guys agree with me, um, and we'll go from there. So we'll see you guys. Have a good day.